comes easily, never will leave your soul. No one's ever gonna lift you higher than them. Never feel so free when you lose control.
So, new intro tutorial. Stop watching the old one. It is outdated and bad. I'm making a new one. This is the new intro tutorial. For this intro tutorial, I'll be using my Lightroom, but you can use any Lightroom you want. It does not matter what Lightroom you use, to be honest. I'm gonna be starting with the Cinema4D. I already have audio edited. If you want to learn how to edit audio, there's a video right here. I'm not going to make a second tutorial to edit audio because this one is perfectly fine. So, first things first, when you're in your Cinema4D file, first thing you want to do is click Mode, Project, FPS to 60, or whatever frame rate you're working in. So if you're rendering a 60 FPS intro, set it to 60. If you're doing 30 FPS, set it to 30, and so on. As well as that, you want to go to here, and then make sure all frames is turned off. You want this off, or else your audio will not be in sync. It'll be, that button, this button here, will look like a camera, and it'll be on the right side of your timeline in older versions of Cinema4D. So most of the people watching this will probably be the camera icon. And you want to click the camera icon and turn off all frames. So I will go over the old positions of things and the new positions of things. So no matter what version you're on, you should be able to follow. All right, next we're gonna want to make our viewport look good. So go to display, and you can use this, or you can use hidden line. Most people prefer hidden line because it's easier to see the text that you're working with. But any of these settings will look good. You just figure out what you like. Hidden line will work better if you have a worse computer. And then in the options, I like to have SSAO turned on because it puts a little bit of shadow between the text. But as well, it's also personal preference, and if your Cinema4D is running bad, turn this off. Okay, now we will make text. If you're in new Cinema4D, you click here, and then you click text. If you're in old Cinema4D, I think you can also go to create and text, but you can also just go to MoGraph and then MoText. That's where you find it on every Cinema4D version other than this one. This Cinema4D, it's here. Old Cinema4D, it's MoGraph, MoText. Okay, so once you have your text created, you can set it to middle. You just click middle, and then you can move around the viewport using these buttons in the top right. So the spin, the zoom, the move, or you can hold Alt and left click to turn, middle click to move around, and right click to zoom. I prefer holding Alt because I don't have to reach up to the top right. Make sure you save all the time. So to make your text have depth, because when you spawn it in, it'll look like this, probably, very flat. I usually give my text 60 to 80, sometimes 50, but for this I'm gonna go with 70. And then you just wanna position your text, hold shift to move it down, and then hold shift to move it into the middle to where you want it. Shift and click. And then you'll be able to position it right about in the middle. This doesn't matter too much, but since you're gonna recenter it later, but it'll be better to look at when you're figuring out how you want the text to look if it's centered, because you can just duplicate the text and move things around easier. All right. Next thing you want to do is find a font that you want. So I will probably have a lot more fonts in here since I've downloaded a ton of fonts, but if you don't have any fonts in here or don't have enough, just go to DeFont, type in the text that you want, and then figure out a font that looks good with it. But I'm just going to pick a font from my own list. Okay, now that I have a font that I like, I can go into the caps, set these to fillet cap. I will also show you how to do this on the new Cinema4D. In the text, caps, and then just increase the size. This increasing the size is the exact same thing as setting fillet cap, however you pronounce it. And then here, segments, set this to 8, or if you're in here, set it to 8. I prefer 12. These are both the exact same thing depending on which version you have. Then what you want to do is create the text again. So control, click, and drag it to make a new thing, or just control C, control V, both work. Then what you want to do is you want to turn off constrain so it'll make it stick out, and then reduce the size. I'll do 30. Now I'll push it back into the middle. And one of these texts should have constrain on, or else they'll be about the same size. So I prefer having constrain on for most of my text, but sometimes you want to like turn off constrain and then make this 5 and then make this like 8. It'll give you a different looking text, like a bigger, blockier text. Or if you want rounder looking text, you can set it to constrain, set these to a high number, and then set this to that same number. Then you have like rounded text. To do that in new Cinema4D, you basically do the exact same duplicate, and then you just click bevel outside, and that is the exact same thing as constrain. Bevel outside and constrain are the exact same thing, so follow the same process. But I'm gonna be using the old text because in the new version of Cinema4D, the text does not work with the cell render option. So in the old version of Cinema4D, when you create your text and put cell render, it'll create a little outline around the caps. But when you make it in the new version of Cinema4D, the text just does not do that outline effect. So I have to import old text in. And it should be pretty easy to do if you're using the new version. You just grab it from an old Lightroom or intro. But okay, now that we have the text made, I'm just gonna go ahead and convert the text into functional text because we can't work with this. So I'm gonna click on both of these, control click, make sure the distance is equal on both sides. You want your middle text to be in the center. Make sure you're happy with the roundness of the text, how thick it is, and then click, control click, C. Press the C key, and you can convert it to an editable text. Now, when you open both of these, you'll see that you have a bunch of text. Now, you can go to MoGraph, Fracture, or go here. No, here. You go here and you click Fracture. I prefer going to the MoGraph, but this is a feature in the new version. Then you just Control-C, Control-V, title this whatever you want, text, whatever. Drag this underneath that. Then Control-C, Control-V again. Create a null. You can press that here, or you can do Create Null. Put this null under Fracture. Then drag this fracture under the other fracture. And then Control drag it as many texts as you have. So I have 4 letters, so I'll make 4 of these. Then I will name each one by double-clicking each letter for organization. So now you can see we have our text set up, but we don't have our text in here. We need to put the text in there so that these controllers can do what they need to do. So drag each one in to its selective category, respective category. And then do the same. Make sure you're holding over the null, not over here, because stuff will not work. T. And delete that. And now we have our functional text. Now you want to close this so it's easier to manage. And right now you'll find that if we try to rotate, it's all in the wrong place. It's not what we want. So to get that, we will go to Mesh if you're in the old version of C4D, or Tools if you're in the new version of C4D. So Mesh and then Axis, Axis Center, or Tools, Axis Center. In the old version, it's Mesh, so if your Cinema4D does not look like mine, go to Mesh. If it does, go to Tools, Axis, Axis Center. And now, turn on all the settings that I have, and then click on Null, Coordinates, 0, 0, and do that for every single one. You can press backspace and it'll work. Delete, delete, and then click off. And now, all of your text is perfectly centered. And now you can close these. And then what you can do is middle click, or click on this button right here, and you can switch to the front facing view. So this view will be facing flat forward, no perspective. And you can position your text so where it's just about how spaced out you want it. And then now you have your text. Just control click on all of that and then put the line directly in the center and then switch back using middle click. So this is how I make text. I'm not sure how other people make text, but this is the only version I've ever learned. So maybe if there's a better version to make text, I will make a video on it, but this is the method I know, and that's worked for me. All right, now what you can do, you can open these again, and if you pull up the bottom, you will have materials, or if you're using this version, you can click this button and you'll see all the materials in your Lightroom. If you have a Lightroom open, I was just opening a Lightroom for this, so you don't have to bother with importing. But you have a Lightroom, just pick out what materials you want to use and just drag them onto your material. So I will just do that. You can control click on these to duplicate them to other materials as well. So I'm just gonna throw these on. And then I can do Control R to test what it looks like. So that's how it looks. I can see that it's in the wrong order, which if I use this, I can see it right here. So I'm gonna switch to this so I can mess with my materials. So I'm gonna switch all of these around. Should be easy. And then Control R, that's how it looks. if I want something different, I can quickly just control click on all of the ones that I want to change, and then drag a new one over this material slot. And then I control R again, and now I have a different material. Now I can do the same thing for the other one, control R, different material. Now, if I want to change the color of this material, I can double click on it, and I can see this color box. I can just click on that or mess with this, and I can simply just change the hue to something that I want. So let's say I want a slightly darker blue. I can just make it 212, 85. And I'll go to diffusion, nothing to change. All of these are unchecked, so I don't need to change anything. Now, if I had a reflective material, for example, let's go to this material. I would need to go to the reflectance, and I would need to change both this color and this color, because there is different colors. But for this one, it is just this color. So if you find that when you change the hue of a color in color, that the text looks weird, you might need to go into reflectance and change the reflection color. But I am good with how this text looks, so I think I will use these materials. So now I will close this, display, hidden line, save. Then I will control click. Actually, before you drag your materials, this is very important. Very, very important. Go to your drag over your materials, projection cubic, not flat, cubic, projection to cubic, and seamless. Always do this. Always. Sometimes you might need to do spatial, depending on what material it is. And sometimes you might need to offset. Offset U, offset V, if you don't like how the texture pattern looks. But you always want to do seamless cubic or seamless spatial. Very rarely do you not want this, because that will fix very broken textures on your materials. If you have stretched textures, that is why. A lot of people do not do that, and their textures will look stretched. But when you have that on, it's a very good thing, so keep that on. Now we control click this to close everything. And now I will create our camera rig. So the way I like to do it, you can go create spline circle, or click here, click circle. I will create a null, create null, put that under there, and then I will create a camera and put this camera under the null. So I'll set my camera's position to 0, so you can just press delete and it'll turn into 0. Set everything to 0 on the camera, all of it to 0. And now on the focal length, I'll make this 22. Then I will pull this, I will click on the null, and I'll pull it back, and then click this square to go into the camera view. So this is what the camera sees. If I zoom in, zoom out, that is what it'll see. I always like to control with a null rather than the camera, because then I can control the camera differently. This is just personal preference. You can ignore the null and just put the camera under the circle, but also hide this. It's also preference. It does not matter. You can hide it, you can unhide it, does not matter. You just double click this circle to hide it, or editor visibility off. Okay, now we have the camera. The focal length set to 22 does not matter. You can set it to 18. If you prefer faster movements, 22 is middle, 28. You can also you can leave it at 36. This is what Browse Lightroom has it set to. Most Lightrooms usually do 20s, 20s-ish, 18s. So I'm gonna leave mine at 22. Next, I will close this, or I'll leave it open, because you'll find if we try to move around or go like this, we're still in the camera. And if we exit the camera by clicking here, you'll see the camera is actually moved, and we don't want that. So we set this back to 0. Make sure if you're moving around the viewport, you unclick your camera. Unclick the camera and then move around. Go back in the camera, do not move around. Very important to remember. You might mess up your camera movements at some point and you have to fix all of that, and it's a mess. So keep that in mind. All right, now we have the camera, we have the text. What do we do now? So now we can create the sound, the audio. So I like to do MoGraph effector sound. Make sure you're not clicking anything. Nothing is selected when you do this. Then I will just drag this below everything and then put the text above the camera so everything is organized. This is usually how I like to organize my projects. The sound below, then the camera, then the text. Open the sound, click effector, soundtrack, load sound. Click on the sound file you want to put in and click open. And now you will have your audio. So what you want to do now is you want to extend your timeline to the amount of frames that you want. So my song ends, I want my intro to end right around that beat. So I'll cut off the audio at around 1175 so that the fade out isn't just playing, because you can extend your scene in After Effects when there's no text, and you can save render time by not rendering a black screen. So just, cut it off whenever your text is gone, or give it a second, whatever your preference is. You could also do the same for the start, but I prefer to keep my start position at 0 so it doesn't complicate things. But some people like to also increase their start number to cut down on the fade in time. But now that we have everything set up, I can click on this button right here, the timeline button. But in the old Cinema4D, I will go ahead and open it because it'll be a little bit difficult to explain this. When you want to make a marker, you have to click here, click animate, and now in this window, you can make markers by just clicking here. All right, that's how you do it. Pretty simple. I will keep this window open in case I need to explain something else. But in this version, you click here, then you bring this up, and now you have markers. I also like to turn this on. So these 3 on. This is very useful for later. And then click on here. So you're in F-curve mode to begin with, because you will not need to close this menu. You are perfectly fine staying in this menu. Now, what you want to do is start adding markers. You do not need to add markers. A lot of people don't place markers and they just throw keyframes wherever they want. You can go ahead and do that, but I prefer to do markers. This is also just preference. You can do whatever you want. I like to do markers. So I will go through and pick out what beats I want to move at. And you can roughly place your markers where you want them and then go back through and refine them to be perfect. So you can just Alt right click to zoom in really close and then just make sure they're perfectly on sync. Just play right on top of it and make sure it's synced. Okay, now that all of them are in sync, number one rule of working on anything, always save. Save after you do anything, because if you don't save, you're going to crash and lose everything, or something's going to happen, you're going to lose your progress, and then you're going to hate yourself because you lost 1 hour of progress. So always save, every time. Number two, drink water. Okay. Now, also preference. I prefer to drag all of my markers. You're gonna have to click up where the markers are, drag over all of them, and then just set the color to something I like. I'll just use like 208, 85. And just so something's cohesive. Because in the new version of Cinema4D, it starts randomizing the colors. And if you're in the old version of Cinema4D, it doesn't do that, but it might be hard to see or annoying to look at, so you can go ahead and change it if you want. Now, in the new version of Cinema4D, you'll want to keep this window open. But if you're in the old Cinema4D, you want to go from animate, you want to go back to standard once you've finished putting your keyframes. Back to standard. Now, what you can do is start animating. So I like to start with my camera and kind of animate some things with it, or just go all the way through with one thing. So just do a few movements with this, a few movements with that, and just fill in the blanks. You will see as we go along. So start with the camera. Think about what I want to do. See the movements I want to make. Okay, I have an idea of what I want to do. So, to start doing movements, I want to move this X. So, MoGraph, vector, plane. That is a generic movement tool. It can move any position you want and work in a 0 to 100% scale, or more or less, depending on how you want to do it. I want to do this. I want to leave it like this for now, so maybe negative 500. I like that. Now I'm going to change this camera position to be right here. I want to do an interesting start. And then pull this null in, a camera zoom, And I want to start my animation around 150. So I'm going to click this keyframe button in coordinates to add a keyframe. Now, in this version, actually, yeah, there we go. It was bugged for me, but I clicked this and it fixed. In this version of Cinema4D, if you have a keyframe and you have these settings set, I can just click here, and now I can see my keyframes. Very easy. Super helpful. In the old version of Cinema4D, let's say cube. I want to move this cube here. No, I want to move it from here to here. In order to do that, I need to right click, click animation, show F curve. Now I'm in a menu which is identical to this. It is just in another box. So whenever you see me messing with this thing, it is exactly the same as going here and clicking show F curve. So if you're on an old version of Cinema4D, just make that comparison. You need to always click here and show F curve if you want to do the same thing that I'm doing. Here I can just click on another object and then I have the curves here already pulled up. There is a way to do this in the old Cinema4D as well. All you have to do is in this menu, I think you can click automatic mode, and that should allow you to, yes. So if you turn these two settings on, automatic and link view to object manager, you can stick this right here, bring this back down. You will have the exact same thing that I have, no different. So if that makes it easier, you can go ahead and do that. All right, back to animating. I'm going to start it here, and I want to zoom out of the letter. So at this point, add another keyframe, then bring it out. Because at this point, right here, I want it to be zoomed out. I like to do a lot of my iterating inside of the F-curve menu. It's very helpful. I can tweak things very easily. So now I just drag this down a little bit, change it up. Now I have a smooth animation. Maybe I'll drag this down. Drag this, adjust it. You want to create smooth arcs. The smoother the arc, the smoother your animation will look. Creating very sharp curves is very difficult to make it look good. It requires a lot more skill, I would think. I think from my experience with working with F-curves, it is actually much easier to make an animation that looks good by just putting a keyframe right in the middle and doing a very simple curve than it is to do very fast moves. I feel like very fast moves are a lot harder to make it look good. But at the same time, it's very easy to make very repetitive fast moves look good, while making a repetitive slow intro is very boring for some people. So when you do make a slow intro, you have to make it very interesting. You have to have movements that are cool to look at. You need to make the viewer enjoy it. If you don't, then they're just gonna look at the intro and be like, wow, this took like 5 seconds to animate. Or they see a very fast moving intro and you do good moves that are smooth, but you can do repetitive moves, they'll think, oh wow, that looks cool, even though it's the same thing over and over. But combining the two, very interesting moves, very fast moves, very smooth moves, it can look very good. But for this intro, I'm just going to do something slow and try to make it not look generic. Maybe just increase the speed a little bit to be more in sync, but not too much to be unsmooth. So here, I want it, after this, I want it to go back in with the letter. So I'm going to pull it in. And then I'm just going to pull this down a little bit and drag it out. So I want it to land right around here. about that distance away. I want it to be a little bit close, but not too close. Maybe a little faster. So here, I'm going to click the plane. And right about where it starts to go back the other direction, I'm going to add a keyframe. Add another keyframe at the marker. And then around the end of this place, set it to 0. Open here, click strength. And then I will change the curves of the strength. Drag this down. And there we go. Now it should move back into the text. Maybe we want this to look a little faster on the tail end. So we click on this, Control drag this marker, this little handle to the left, and now it ends a lot faster. I want this movement to look a little bit harsher. So I'm gonna increase the intensity of this by making it a lot faster. And a lot bigger. I want the movement to look a lot larger. Okay. I want this to start a little later, so I'm gonna control drag this so it starts a little bit later. Pull this a little bit up. And then maybe I will go into this, pull this back just a little bit, and pull this forward, and then bring this back just a bit. I want it to be just a little bit closer, but also a little bit further from the text. So now I can make this look a little bit nicer by taking this and going just before, setting the X, and then going way after, set it back to 0. And actually, new idea. Instead of that, I'm gonna drag this over to the next thing. So this will be part of the next movement. I can get away with a cheap, slow moving movement if I just create this shape. It'll move slowly, and I don't even need to use a third keyframe. Okay. I think I will add another MoGraph plane to the text, specifically the X, and I will give it a rotation. So I think I want it to rotate in a 360 degrees on the H. Go to Effector, and I want it to start right here and go around 45 and end right just before it finishes moving. And then go into the thing, strength, the curve, mess with it, make it look good. Now, it'll look a lot faster, so I'm gonna slow this down just a bit, make it look smoother. Maybe finish it a little faster. Now, I think I want to continue its rotation back into the text. So set this to 200, actually, when it finishes its movement. So at the very end of it coming back, I want to continue it moving. So do that, drag the previous one up, and now I have a continuous movement. And if I want it to stop right here where it's facing, I want to look, this line is 100. Drag this a little bit, drag this a little bit, and drag this, and just keep pulling each one until you have it a pretty smooth line going through 100. And now it'll sit at 100 for a while. It'll face the camera for longer. And it's smooth. Now, I think I want to make the text a little more interesting. I can do this by clicking fracture, not text, fracture. This will affect the letters below it. So the way fractures work is they will mess with whatever is below it. So the text will mess with the null, the fracture will mess with the text, and the text will mess with this single fracture unit. So if I want to move all the letters at once without moving the individual letters, I use text. If I want to move the individual letters, I will use fracture. For this, I will go to MoGraph, Effector, Random, while selecting fracture. Not the big text, just the fracture above the letters. Click Random. All the letters should move around. Now, swap it off position, set it to rotation, and I want it to have some kind of offset. So maybe 16:4. So now the letters have a neat little offset. Since the X is rotating to the right though, I want to change the seed so the X is a little bit tilted to the right, so it kind of continues that rotation. I'll just keep clicking through the seeds until I find a cool one that I like. I think I like how this one looks. So now I will just turn the strength to 0 and do the exact same thing I did with the plane. Right about here, and then right about here. And then I'll click on random, control drag, just like the X position, and get away with doing a very cheap curve like this. And now we have a nice little randomness applied to it. Maybe I'll increase this just a tiny bit so it looks a little more dramatic. Now, I've pretty much finished that first movement. I might come back to it and add a little bit to it, but for now, I'm going to keep going. I think I want to make this slide to the middle a little more subtle. So I'll do that by changing some rotation coordinates. So I think I'm going to start off by changing the H, and I'm going to go here. And I want to change this to maybe a little bit to the right. Then I will continue. Maybe set this to like 40. Really tilted to the right. And now I have a new button, rotation H. just click on rotation H, change it using the same controls, zoom in a little, then move this up, hold shift to keep it on the same axis while dragging it, drag it, and now we have maybe I can make this a little more subtle by just dragging this out a lot more. There we go. Now it's a lot less noticeable. I can improve this even further by leading this animation into another kind of movement. So this movement, I can call it like a zoom through or a teleport movement, where you make it seamlessly go from one position to another by just moving one marker, one keyframe, just one frame behind the marker, and then go one frame to the marker. I'm gonna just copy and paste this, and then for this, I'm just gonna set this right perfectly in the middle, about 90 degrees. And then just before we move, we're gonna set this down to a negative 90 degrees. So, see how it goes from here to here, and you can almost not tell the difference at all. In motion, you will barely be able to tell. Now, when I go right here, I'm gonna copy and paste this this marker, keyframe, marker, keyframe, whatever, keyframe. So we have this, so we keep this movement for longer, and then shift drag this up. If you can't click it, you might need to zoom in a little bit. Shift drag the left side one up, straight up, so you have a little bit of a slope. And then you just drag this and flatten it a lot. Make it flat. So you don't have any effective, like it doesn't affect it at all. Maybe increase this, because we need that. We need to get it all the way past 40. And now we have a very long slope. Maybe drag this out so it's smoother. And now here, right at that beat, we can pull this back around to reveal the text. So when this goes through, drag this down to keep that momentum. So we want to keep the momentum through the entire movement. Big changes in momentum will really throw off your movement. So now, when you keep that momentum going through, the jump is non-existent. You don't even notice it. Now, this movement might be a little bit fast, so I'm just going to drag this back, pull this across, and pull this across. Now, the movement should be a little bit more fluid, a lot less jarring. Pull this to the side a little bit, flatten the curve out, make it less fast. Because the steepness of a curve is how fast it moves over a certain amount of time. So, the way a curve works is when you're flat, you're not moving. When it's changing direction up or down, it is increasing or decreasing that number of units. So if you have a really, really, really slow slope, it's going to be moving really slow. If you have a very steep slope, it means it's going to be moving across a very large amount of numbers in a very short amount of time, meaning very fast. Object go quick. So here I think we can set this to 0 actually, all the way down to 0. Center the text back, and then just pull this a little bit so it comes in a lot slower. And now I want to give the position a little bit of attention because we have not touched our position in a while. I want to actually reduce this a little bit because I think it's a little bit too sharp now compared to the rest of the animation. So I want to pull this up like that. And then I want to actually pull this other end up even more. Because I want it to keep continuously moving throughout the entire movement. There we go. Now it's a lot less harsh. Now, I think I want to pull this down and up. I want it to be very close to the text. And then I want to pull it back out of the text after this movement. And now I will just add a marker so I can figure out what I want to do. Add a keyframe, not a marker. I think I'll do a bounce so it gets really close to the text and then it backs out. But I'm going to do a really slow one. So it'll move in really slow and come out really slow. And then here I want it to be zoomed out. Place that down. Shift to disconnect it. Oh yeah, shift. Shift is what disconnects them from each other. Forgot to mention that. Hold shift to disconnect them. You can use them individually and then pull them out. Maybe I'll move this one way to the side so it's a lot slower. Now, the text is looking a little bit sad at this point. It's kind of just sitting there, not doing anything interesting. Some people will leave it like this. I mean, it looks cool, depending on what you do, but for this part, I think I want to do something a little bit subtle. So I think I want to make it do a little bit of motion, but nothing too extreme. So I'm going to click fracture, homograph, effector, formula. This is going to give it a math-driven movement. And what I'm going to do is disable the scale and disable the position. I'll think about what I want to do. I wonder if I can change this to be something like something that people haven't done really, you know, something not common. Maybe scale on the X value. So we get very stretchy text, maybe, and then moving in and out, maybe. So, or maybe upward stretchy text. Now, to make this look a little bit smoother, we can set the formula to 300 or 280. That'll make it so that the movement is more grouped, less spaced out between the letters. Maybe I don't like the position scale thing, so maybe I'll change it to a Y movement with a little bit of this rotation. Or maybe back and forth with that rotation. Maybe I'll go 340, but turn the variables section project time down a little. This will slow down the time scale of the movement. It'll slow it down, but not change the positions. Changing this number in here changes the gap between the animations of each letter. This just changes the speed of all of them. Maybe I will do a uniform scale. Set it to something very, very low, something subtle. Just to add a little bit of variance. And now I will go to 0, 100. Go back 1, go forward 1, 0. So it'll go from full to none. Maybe I want to make this fade in a little bit faster, so, or slower, a little bit smoother. So just drag this to the middle, control drag it to keep it straight, drag this out a little bit, pull it in. Now, for this marker, I think I want to have the T do a little bit of a separation and then fly across back into the text for this beat. And then have the text finishing its rotation, and then do a simple rotation into a still. So to do that, I'm going to first start by animating the T, so I can do the rest around the T. I'll make its position the side by just like 130. And then set that a little bit over. Now all I have to do is keyframe this, same as the rest, but because I'm having it come back in, I'll have it at 60 on both ends, and then a 0 here. And now I will be able to pull this up and pull this up. And now it should meet at around 100 right here. Perfect 100. Next, we're gonna animate our camera. Because we want it to follow the text. So actually, how about instead of animating the text, right? How about not the text. Instead of animating the camera's X position, we animate the camera's rotation itself. So instead of going like this and following it, oops, Control Z that, we go to the camera itself and we give it a little bit of a point toward the text. So to do that, go to right about where it starts to move. Then we go to here, point it to about where it's at. Then we go here, point it to where it's at. Then go back. And I think I'm going to stop here because I'm going to do something to the text in this. So but I'm going to first pull this down. No, not pull this down. Yes, I am to pull this down. And slow it down. So it's still in sync with the animation. So, click text, click MoGraph effector, plane, parameter, you know the deal. Now, make sure you clicked the text, not the fracture for this, or else it'll look weird. So, go to the rotation tab, rotation box. We're gonna give it a little bit of 360 spin. And then a negative 360, not a 720, just a 360. And then right about here, we'll keyframe it, go back, give it that, and have it finish off just around the end there. You don't have to be too particular about where you place things. You can always just slide things around until it looks good. The looser you are, the more flexible you are, the smoother you'll be able to get your animations. See, this is looking very smooth now. So at this point, I'm going to actually camera animate to follow the text along wherever it's going. I'm actually going to see if this works. Yes, it does. Good to know. I want this to follow where that text is, so. So keep it following, keep it following. I need to go way down. think to do this would be the best option. Here we go. Need this to follow the text properly, so I'm gonna have to be very careful with how I curve this. Actually, I think I'm just gonna pull it straight to the center. I think that'll work a little bit nicer than the bounce back. I will put a keyframe right here so I can make it a little bit faster as it follows the text. I do want it to follow just a little bit. Maybe I'll just use that. And a little bit of that. This is very touchy, trying to get this to be just right. A lot of fine tuning. Okay, I think this should be pretty good. Now for this movement, since it's since the camera is actually rotating itself, if I try to rotate this, it'll start getting all wonky on me. It'll rotate in the wrong way. But I can get around that by just going here and rotating like this, because the order is set to HPB, which means this will go first, then this, and then after all of that, this will go. So it'll still be aligned if I use this. So for this specific movement, while it is rotated like this, I will use this. Point this a little bit to the left. Then I will go 180, 360. Oh, no, was not selecting that. Make sure you have the box selected before you start typing. Check this and see my curves. Do that and pull this up just a little bit so it's not too extreme. Zoom in so I can finely tune it and just drag that. And we should be having a good movement. And actually, I don't like how it does this, where it follows the text. That's not something that I ever like in my own animations. I do not like it when it does that, so I'm gonna do a continuous movement. So I'm gonna have it tilt to the side and then keep moving by pulling it like that. So we just pull it up, tilt it very slightly, And now we need to smooth this side out. Right now, it's hitting it and then it's bouncing back. Let me pull. That's not what I want. Do not click that tool on accident. There we go. Now, this little in-between section is a little boring, so this one right here. So what I think I'm gonna do, actually, I'm going to change the text color. What I'm going to do is something very neat that you can do. Basically, we can keyframe these. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to invert all of this for the start of the animation. The entire beginning is going to be inverted like this. So every time I hit a beat, I'm going to change one of these to be inverted. So keyframe, keyframe, go one ahead, switch this to softer, and then keyframe, keyframe. And now we have a switching letter. Now all I have to do is do that exact same thing for the rest of these, but I think I can get away with just copying and pasting these materials. Yes, it would seem that works. For this one, and for this one, right here. That one will be for there. And now we have a very unique style of sync for this one specific part. Now, close out of that. Go back to the camera. Do a little bit of animation to this, because we need to continue to do this. Also, back to hidden line. Copy and paste this, and just do a very simple zoom. Very zoom in, very simple zoom in and zoom out. I think I can make this a little bigger. A little bit more zoom out. There we go. Now that I zoomed in and zoomed out, I'm gonna have to fix the camera rotation because it seems it's a little bit off now. We need to go way further. But that's all good. Now, back into here, we're going to do a little bit of a zoom in, pretty intense zoom in as well. Zoom in from pretty far away. We zoomed out pretty far for this, and now we'll just leave this here temporarily. Thinking about what I should add, how I should continue with this. I feel like this rotation is too abrupt. I need it to slow down. There we go. Now, what I think I'm gonna do is start from here with H and B, go around both directions. B, I think, is inverting right now. Let me check. Where are you? Ah, yes, B is going the opposite direction. Now this will look pretty cool once it is done, but right now it looks kind of goofy. That's how most movements start out. If you Control-Shift click it, you can keep it locked on the axis and separate it at the same time. Good to know. Control drag it to make this lead in a lot slower. Okay, that should be good. Maybe I'll extend this a little bit, drag it in a little bit smoother on the end. And I'll adjust the position because I think it's a little bit too close right here. Just a little. Now, make sure you close these. You don't have to close them, but I like to close them. I'm going to go mode graph plane on the text, as usual, rotation. This time I'm gonna go negative 360, or negative 360. And then on this part, I'm going to, right when it starts turning around, give it that, give it 100, give it 200. Now, let's see what we can do. Line that up, pull it up. Maybe I'll drag this down a little bit so it has a little bit of reverse movement before it goes into it. Pull that just a little bit. Pull that down. No, I think I'll just leave it like that and then just drag that out just a little. Set this to 100. Pull this down like so. Then give it a 200 again. And just do that. All right, now we have very smooth movements. For this, I'm going to do a very nice thing where we do a plane and we do a rotate. Just give it a 360, go to fields, give it a linear field. Now, in old Cinema4D, I don't think I can demonstrate this in my version. Let's see. Yeah. Basically, instead of a fall off field, you can just set the fall off to linear without having to use a field. You can just set it to linear, you don't have to use a field. If you're in a new version, they replaced it with fields. But your settings will be pretty much identical to mine. So just go to the plane, in one of these settings there'll be a setting to set the fall off to linear. You want to set that to linear and then double click this top thing to hide it on the plane. If you have a linear field, set it here. Now, on your plane, you want to change this if you have the old version. If you have the new version that has linear field, you want to animate the linear field. So with the linear fields, you want to put it, or your plane, you want to put it a little back behind the text, then go ahead of the text where you want it to move, and then keyframe both of that. And then when you go to here, set this to linear, put the little straight line object diagonal while selecting all your keyframes. Now, it'll move very fast. You want to drag each of these out super far. And you'll notice that was not very smooth. It was very jagged. You can take this plane, move it under or above everything in the fracture setting, the plane we just made, put it above everything, then MoGraph effector delay, effector, set this to blend, make this 80, go back to fracture, effectors, put this just below there, above everything else. This is how you stack your layers, so everything above will get affected by the delay, everything below will get ignored. It happens in order from top to bottom, so the things on the top are the first, then the things at the bottom affect the things, so on. It just basically means that the plane will happen, and then it'll apply a delay to that plane, and then the random will apply to that animation, then the formula will apply to that. If that makes sense. The delay will not affect what's below it. That's all you need to remember. So now when we go back to our animation, it'll be very smooth. Maybe we will increase this a little bit and change it to positive 360 and see how that looks. Maybe I want to make this field a bit longer. I'll have to bring it down so it's not touching text. Pull this to the side. If we want this to be smoother, we can make this like 88. Maybe reduce this length. Maybe pull this to the left a little bit. Then we'll finish off the zoom. That should be pretty easy to finish. This up a little bit. Now we want it to go straight through the text at the end. So I'll just put one singular keyframe at the end. Make it like that. There we go. Now, I will add a little bit of interesting animation to this because it kind of sits flat. There we go. Now it just has a little bit of bounce back. Just a small amount of bounce back. Alright, now we have a very simple animation, but a very smooth animation. Now, we can add a little bit more to make this animation look a bit cooler. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on the camera. Or no, I'm just going to create another null, put this under there, this under there. And now this is going to mess up a lot of things, as you can see. Just click on the null, set everything to 0, and go to the camera, set everything that isn't keyframe to 0. Now, everything is fixed. But now we have a null that we can do whatever we want to. I'm going to Alt-G to create another null on top of that null, just so we have a little bit of a backup. Now, to do for this, I do this because now I can go to tags, animation tags, and use a vibrate on this null. Now, if I turn that on, give it 555, and maybe a 0.4. Now we have a subtle amount of camera shake. Maybe I'll set this to 0.5. Now I want to add more camera shake, so I'm going to go to the null above that one, animation, vibrate, regular pulse, and then I want to go up and down. So I will turn this up to 8 and 0.7. And now we have some up and down shake. Now I'm going to set this to 0. Keyframe, go to that marker, 8, keyframe, go to the end, 0, keyframe. I'm going to set this to like 0.74. I want it to be a little bit fast. Now, if I click down here, I can drag these further. There we go. Now we have a little bit of shake to randomize the animation just a little bit. I think this animation's looking pretty good. I'm gonna keep watching through and see if I can add anything else to this animation. I think this is pretty good. Now, you can go ahead and just, back out of everything. And then when you're ready to render, you go here, make sure your render settings are set up properly, then you go save, and then just set your file to there. Make sure you have these on. You want to save it to After Effects. You can do 1080p or you can do 1440, your choice. For this, I'm just going to do 1080, so we'll render faster. And that's it. Save it, then you press this button and it'll render. Or the render to picture viewer somewhere in the center if you're on old Cinema4D. But that is it for the Cinema4D portion. Okay, the After Effects portion of the tutorial. In After Effects, first you want to open After Effects, obviously, but in After Effects you double click here or import file, and then you just want to click your song and then go to your frames and click the .aec file. If you didn't set your render to export to external program and have it set to After Effects, you will not have an AEC file. So you will need to go back and fix that. But you should have an AEC file. Just open this drop down, click the composition, and then drag the song in. Then you want to set your resolution in this view to quarter, and then go in the sidebar to preview. You might have to click down here to make it work. And then set this to quarter as well, and then frame rate auto. And then you can have these settings if you want. Then save, make sure you save it where you want it. Then in your preferences, I think it's performance, memory and performance. No. It is in, let me try to find it. Previews. I think it's previews, yes. In previews, mute audio when preview is not real time. I like to leave this on because it makes things not annoying. So now you have your finished animation here. First things you want to do, I like to rename my text layer to main for organization. Make sure you're saving your After Effects file. Then I do Control Y or right click new solid, and I'll just call this black. This is just going to sit in the background. It's going to be blank. It's not going to do anything, but it'll fix you from having any bugs. Always put a black solid below everything. It saves a lot of time trying to figure out why stuff isn't working. This fixes a lot of your issues. Then do another Control Y. Call this fade. Press T to open your opacity, and then go to where you want it to start. So I want it to go like here. I want it to start fading in right around this point. So set this to 100, keyframe, go further, set it down, then select your keyframes and press F9. And now you should have easing keyframes. So these, instead of moving in a straight line, they move in a curved line. Now, I'm also going to do the fade out. So I'm just gonna go where the text disappears, set this to 100, and go a little bit back, set it to 0. So now it fades out. You can also just have it go straight to black by putting the keyframe right after it. But for this one, it's a slow zoom, so I'm gonna set it slow. Okay, next, we're gonna do another Control Y. I'm gonna call this bars. Make sure you always label your layers or else you're not gonna know what's going on. And then I'm going to go into here, or if you're using the Effects Console plugin, which is free, everyone should definitely download Effects Console. All I have to do is do Control Spacebar and then type CC JAWS and then set the height to 0. And now I have bars. Now you can also make bars with a adjustment layer or Control Alt Y to make an adjustment layer, and then add a motion tile, and then you just reduce the output height, and that does the exact same thing as CC JAWS, pretty much. I like using CC JAWS, but you can use whatever you want. It does not matter. So I'm going to keyframe the bars first of all, because I like to keyframe bars. What I like to do this makes this a lot easier and much faster. You just turn on this toggle transparency, the checkered icon, and then go ahead and hide the black layer by clicking the eyeball, and then we show my bars again. Oops. If you lose your thing, you can click up here to get back into the tab. So now I can see the transparent background and I know where the bars are. So I can keyframe them how I want. So I'm going to set this to 100. And then I want it to go back in right here. Actually, right here. So I'm going to click keyframe, then go a little bit ahead, set this to 80, then press U. Pressing U will show all your frames that are keyframed. Press U, select these, F9 to ease, and press U again to close it. Control S to save. That's pretty good, but actually, U again, click on this, then click the graph editor button. That'll bring up the same graph as Cinema4D. Very similar. It works the exact same way. Make sure that you click this and you're in the value graph. If you use the speed graph, you're gonna be very confused. So make sure you're in the value graph. Next, you can select these and make it a little bit smoother. So I'm gonna pull these out a lot more, pull this way to the right, and then just same as Cinema4D, hold shift, drag each one. And then I think I'm going to do the opposite for this part. I'm going to have it open. I'm going to open this again, do the exact same kind of drag. Hold this a little bit. There we go. Now, close the graph editor, press U to hide that. Show the black layer again, and then turn off transparency grid, and then save. Make sure you're always saving. Now, we can go ahead and do text effects. That's what I like to do first. So what you want to do is set this to full so you can see what you're working with. Make sure you're always saving. Go to main, and you want to add drop shadow. Set this to around 70, and then set this to around 65, 60-ish. Doesn't matter. You just want a high softness and a medium to high opacity. You don't want to go too extreme on either end. And this just makes you might not notice it right now, but when we have a background, it'll add a little bit of shadow onto it. You can see it if I do this. Makes things a little more defined. Very nice to have on. Next, this is optional. You can put find edges, invert it. I'll make sure to put it above the drop shadow so it doesn't affect the drop shadow. You can put this on. It can create a very neat looking effect depending on how much you do it. Don't overdo it though. I usually use this for a lot of my intros, but for this style, I don't think I will use it. I think what I am going to do though is I'm going to do control space, and I will add light sweep, CC light sweep. You want to put this above drop shadow so it does not affect the shadow. Set the intensity to 0, and then hold shift and just drag the width to the max. Then change the edge thickness just a tiny bit and reduce the intensity, something like 22-ish, maybe 24. Now we have a nice little light edge to everything. And then an extra thing we can do, makes things look nice, is we can go into here, we can right click the layer and do layer styles, inner glow. Actually, this is affected by the drop shadow, so we're not going to do that. Delete inner glow. What I'm going to do is I'm going to copy and paste the main, put it below, call it shadow, delete the light sweep, set it to shadow only. So now this layer is just a shadow. And this layer, I will delete the shadow. So this is just the text effects, this is just the shadow. Then that'll allow me to layer style, inner glow, and now it won't be messing with it. So inner glow, I'll set this to around the same color of blue, but just a little lighter. And then I will increase the size. We get a nice soft glow across everything. Increase the range. And then decrease the opacity. Or increase the opacity a little bit. Set it to soft light. Then maybe adjust the color of it just a little bit. There. Now we have subtle glow. Maybe I'll reduce the opacity down to like a 45. Very small amount of glow. It's a very nice effect to have. You can set it to screen or you can set it to soft light. Screen is if you want it to look a lot more, yes, so blend mode to screen will make it a lot more obvious. Blend mode to soft light will keep it very hidden to just those little light spots. Keeps it a lot more subtle. And I like a lot of subtle effects. So we can go ahead and set our viewport to quarter again, so we are not spending years trying to render an image. So next, I think we can go ahead and start doing basic sync. So what you can do is if you exported markers, you can press each one using your number keys. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 0, so on. To teleport to those. So you figure out where you want to sync your beats. So I'm gonna go through and try to figure out what spots I want to sync, where I want to have all my effects land. And I usually prefer not putting a beat on the fade out. I don't like having it like flash and then just hit the screen as it's flashing. It kind of feels off. And I usually don't like it. Some people do it, I don't. A lot of people don't. But I don't know. If you like it, then go ahead and put a marker at the end. Oh yeah, to add markers. It's numpad star by default, but you can change that in your settings, in your keyboard settings, edit keyboard shortcuts. You can change that. I just use numpad star, or I use a mouse button set to numpad star, so I can just quickly put it anywhere I want, but numpad star is the default bind for your markers. Okay. So once you have like the major beats where all the movements happen, you can go ahead and start thinking about where do I want in between beats to land? Where do I want to sync in between? So just go through and listen and try to figure out where you want it to go. Then I'm going to go through and adjust things so they are exactly where I want them. I'm gonna get rid of these actually. And I'm gonna put it over here instead. Sometimes it's nice to have little gaps in your sync between movements, so it's a little less extreme over the entire time. Or you can just go all out the entire intro, your preference. You can press plus and minus to zoom in and out, by the way, if you didn't know that. what I'm going to do now is I'm going to new adjustment layer, or Control-Alt-Y. Put this above the camera beneath the fade. Save, title it sync. This is our main sync layer. This is what we'll be doing most of the sync. Everything else will just be added on top of it. So Control space, or use the bar, the search bar, and I will put shake, S_shake. This is the first effect. I will turn on motion blur and set this to 4 frequency, then amplitude to 0. Then I think for this animation I want a 70x and a 105y, and then a 150z. And then I'll save. Press K and J to teleport to your markers. Very useful feature. I will click amplitude, have it set to 0, then go page down, press the page down key, or go to here and click next frame and set it to 1, and then you press U, drag, Control C, press U again, K, Control V, K, Control V, K, Control V, K, Control V, and so on. And then press U again. You'll see all of these are open now, and they're all there. Now, around near the end, go 0. Then, save, drag over all of them, zoom in, and drag it 1 back so that the beat is on the marker. Zoom out again, open your F curves, click this, so it selects all of them, F9. Or you can just select all of them like this, and make sure you press F9. Now they're smooth. So what we can do is we can go over it and see how it looks. What I think I'm going to do is delete these, and then delete these, and this. And this one. Because I only want my shake to happen on very big beats. This is what I like to do, where I will alternate between just small sync and then the full sync, depending on what kind of beat it is. So in the F curve menu, I'm going to select these and just pull this to the left a little bit, and then pull this down slightly. And now we have some pretty decent looking shake. We can also set the seed just a little bit different so we can get some more unique shake. So changing the seed just randomizes the current shaking, how much it's currently shaking. The seed just changes the randomization. So you throw a bunch of marbles on a table, it lands. Changing the seed is like re-throwing the marbles again. It changes how random it is. Just gives you a different result with the same settings. Now what we're going to do is we're going to follow the shake for this. Click Z distance, keyframe Z distance. You could do the exact same thing using a transform and using the scale, but I like to use Z distance usually. Press U, go 1 frame down, set this to 0.8, Control C, press U, Control V, Control V, Control V, Control V, Control V, Control V. Now it's on all of the shake markers, and then set the very end one to 1. And then do the exact same thing where you zoom in, pull them back, zoom out. Exact same process. Now, we can leave it like this. If we want really like snappy shake, snappy sync. Or we can open this, go to here and press F9, and now we have more of a Braz style sync. And then if we want to make it a little more smooth, we can drag everything except for the last one, go out of here, zoom in, and pull it one back, and now it's slightly smoother. Or we can drag it one more again. Now it's even smoother, even more smooth. This is something that you'd see in more classic styles. Where it has very fast sync, or like Slomby and whatnot. Those classic styles. Or, if you want, you can go ahead and delete this, then copy and paste the one at the start, and then put this in between every single marker. And now you have your one unit key marker, 1 unit keyframe in between every single thing. Then you select the 0.8 unit keyframe, the bottom one, drag it up like this. If you drag it really hard like this, it'll be very bouncy looking. Or if you do it very far like this, it'll be very slow. It'll slide into it'll just slowly zoom in. I've seen a lot of people using this movement recently, but usually I prefer doing the one frame. But for this one, I think this fits pretty well. I'm gonna pull this a little bit to the side, so we have a nice V shape. This is very nice for some smooth, subtle zoom in. Less noticeable zoom in, and it complements the shake pretty well. You can also do the exact opposite of this, where you set these to 0.8 and these to 1, and it just bounces backwards. That's another type of sync that people like to do. It's different, but it's also another popular sync, at least back then. Not sure how much people do it nowadays. Next, since we have our shake, we have our zoom. Now we want to add twitch. Like that. Save. I like to set the speed to 120 or 90 or 75. It depends on what style you're doing. You can try 75, you can try 80, you can try 90, you can try 100, you can try 110, or 120. For this, I'm going to do 120. Set the amount to 25 or 30. I think I'm going to do 25. go to the enable, light, slide. You can use scale, but for this, I'm going to not. If you're doing more intense sync or very fast sync, I'd recommend using scale. Now in the slide settings, I'm going to set the amount to 25 and I'm going to set the RGB to 5. Now it's pretty slow to render Twitch. I'm not a big fan of Twitch, but it works. But it's just super slow. But we have to deal with that. So the Twitch is going to go on every marker. I'm going to go to the start, amount, 0 at the very start, page down, 25. Press U, Control C, U, Control V, or U, then K, Control V, K, Control V. The same exact process as before. Exact same. Go to the end, set it to 0. But for this, I'm going to actually select these, bring them back one just as before. For this, I'm actually going to open this, and I'm going to drag this to the side a little bit, and then I'm going to copy and paste it. So I see how I put it just about in the between these two. Every time I see a big gap like this, I'm going to copy it and paste it directly in the middle. So this is a big gap, put it just about in the middle. Big gap, just in the middle. Big gap, put it around in the middle. These aren't too bad, but this one is a pretty big gap, so I'm going to put it a little bit to the right, not quite in the middle, because it's not a big gap, it's just a small big gap. This one is a pretty big gap. I'm going to put it just about in the middle. This one, also just about in the middle. So now we have them all about the same length. Click amount, F9, drag them all, and then just point this like that. Now you'll have pretty strong Twitch, but for this I want to cut it off a little earlier. So I'm going to drag the bottom, select all of the bottom, hold shift, drag it just slightly to the left. That'll make it cut off a little earlier. And now we can watch it pre-render, see if it looks good or if it looks bad. So I think the Twitch at the start is actually a little bit too intense. So I'm going to open this, all of these. I'm just going to select all of them, hold shift, click in this box, and drag it down to about 10. And then pull these down so it cuts off very early. And this one I'm going to pull to the left because I want it to last not nearly as long. Those are about the same. Now, let's preview this. Yeah, that's more of the intensity that I want. Maybe a little bit too subtle. So I'm just going to bring it up a very tiny bit. And I don't really like the seed that's going on here. So I'm going to go into the slide settings and just drag the seed a little bit so we get a little bit of a different looking Twitch. Because I don't like how it looked at the start. So I'm going to change that. And now we can preview this. It's a lot better. And now we have a double layer of sync. So we have our Twitch sync that is in sync with the shake, but also solo Twitch, where there's nothing else complementing it right now. Now, what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to control space or search bar, and then S glow. I want to put a glow over this. And I'm going to increase the width wide just a tiny bit. Set the brightness to 0. Save. And then keyframe, exact same thing, brightness to 2. And then we're just going to do the exact same thing as before. Now, go in, select these, except not the end, and drag them back 1 so it's on the marker. Click all of them, F9, open, select the top only, then drag these down until you're just about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. So usually I like to have them cutting off at around 12 to 16. So 12 for a faster paced sync, 16 for something slow like this, maybe a little bit slower. So it cuts off at around 16 to 17 frames is where it hits the bottom. And this should be good. Now you're not really going to see it because this is pretty dark, so I'm going to set the threshold to 0.4 so it's a little bit brighter. And you're kind of starting to see it now, but it'll be a lot more noticeable once we have a background and all that stuff added on. Right now you're not going to notice it because it's just floating text, and the text is pretty dark. But yeah, here you can see it. Kind of pops in there. Okay, we don't really need to preview the glow, so control space, we're gonna continue and add a light burst 2.5. Make sure to save. Now I will do the exact same thing as everything else. Ray length to 0, keyframe, go down, pay ray length 50. Then you already know, copy paste every single little marker, and this one we're gonna do just like the Twitch. So select these, drag them back 1 so that they're just on the marker. Now open it, copy the bottom, copy one of them that's at 0. Then you want to paste it also in the middle, just like the Twitch. Just go through and paste them all in the middle, just like you did the Twitch. Then F9, and similar to the glow, you're going to drag these down, but then you're also going to drag these to the right. So now we have a very quick flash that happens. Light burst does that, does a cool flash like that. But I think I'm actually going to reduce it for this portion because I think it is also a little bit too strong. I'm going to set this to 15. And then just drag these up, because with light burst, you do not want it to... You need to be very careful with light burst. You don't want it to cross underneath here. You don't want it to go negative. You want to keep it above 0. Because light burst is the one effect in this stack that can actually go into the negatives and it'll start inverting inside of the text and it looks weird. So you do not want to do that. So I think this sync is looking pretty good. It's pretty standard sync, but it's pretty good, pretty decent, and very easy to do. Now, I'm going to hide the sync layer, and you're going to see why. Actually, always do this as well. I'm just going to go ahead and cover this. I usually do this at the very end, but you want to add a motion tile to your sync layer, and put this motion tile at the very, very, very top. Now, you will want to set these to 150 and 150. Width and height to 150. This will prevent you from having weird edges, from having black edges just appearing on the sides. This will mirror the edges so you don't notice it. You want to do this. You can do this at the very start before you add any effects, or you can do this at the very end. I forgot to do it because I always do it at the very, very end, but I'll go ahead and cover this now, so you don't have to watch until the very, very end to figure this out. Always put motion tile above your effects that distort the image. Any effect that distorts the image, put a motion tile on it. Things like color, like if I add an adjustment layer, Control-Alt-Y, hue, Control space, HLS. If I do this, I don't need that. It's not going to cause any issues. If it's just at the bottom and I do all of this, or I like saturation, none of that will affect it. So you're good there. Just effects that distort the image, you want to put that. So I like to do my rest of my sync without the sync layer on. So I'm gonna start by going through and finding points in the song where I think it would sound good, would fit the song. So I think right here is a great opportunity to put a ring. So what I can do is I can go copy and paste the main layer, delete the light sweep, and call this edge. And then I Control space, call it edge detect, and set this to 4 or 3. Go into full so we can see how that looks. Alright, I like how that looks. Drop the saturation just a tiny bit, or that should be good. And then I can... Actually, this should be fine. No, it's not fine. See how there's these weird pink things happening? I don't know why that happens, but find edge is janky and kind of annoying. So what you can do to cheat this, copy and paste the edge layer, delete this, and set this to color. Now, your edges will be the color of the text. It's a pretty neat thing you can do. Very nice, very useful. Now what we can do is control click this. So you have both edge layers selected, pre-compose, edge layer. Enter, and now we have an edge layer. Very compact and it's hidden. And now we have it on one layer so we can just affect it as we need. So, we have this edge layer. Go ahead and switch this back to quarter. We have our edge layer. What I think I'm going to do with it is I'm going to have it follow a little ring layer. So I'm going to create ellipse tool up here. I'm going to create a solid ring, actually call it, you can call it whatever. I'm gonna just call it ring mask. Then click, and now you should have, no, never mind. Let me, yeah, no. I will just click right here. Now just hold Control and Shift at the same time, and it'll make it like that. And then you just click on this again, click on the mask, and Control T, and then you can drag it around and just hold Shift, and eventually you can lock it in pretty much in the middle. The fiddle with it. I don't think there's a way to transform it to the center. I will check. Now what we can do, we can keyframe this expansion. So I'm going to pull this all the way down until it's not visible. And I'm going to click toggle transparency and solo this layer. This little thing is a solo. It'll solo this layer. So now I will also solo the main layer, so I know what's going on. I'm gonna hit. I want this to expand all the way, and then I want to Control D while selecting it, set this to subtract, and then just pull that. So now we have animation here. I'm gonna press F9 on these, and then pull them way to the sides. There we go. Now we have a mask. We can do anything we want with this mask. So I'm going to go here, Control K, or not Control K, just K. Click this, Alt, bracket. The bracket key to the right of the P key. That is the bracket. And then I'll go here, Alt, right bracket. You can do the same by just dragging the edges. I'm going to just put them on the ends of each, and then press U. Or U again, and hide it, save. And now I have a ring mask. I'm going to unhide everything and turn this off. So you're probably wondering, what use is this giant black thing in the middle of the screen good for? Well, I can actually go in here now. I'm actually going to do something first. I'm going to feather each one. So open the mask, open each mask, and then go back to transparency in here and give it around a 50 pixel feather. Yeah, that should be good. And now make sure there's no edge issues. It goes all the way out. So in the center, it's blank. At the very end, it's blank. Now, you want to give it a little bit of feather so it has a little bit of transition. Just close the ring mask again. Now we're ready to use it. So hide it, because we don't need to see it. But now what we can do is we can use this. Let's say, okay, I want to desaturate. All right, now I go here and set alpha matte. And go HLS. Color balance HLS, set it to saturation, -100. So now, see we have an animated desaturation. And now what we can do is we have an animated desaturation. So I'm gonna also do the exact same thing and clip it off at the exact same point. So we have this little stack. This is now one effect. Now what I can do as well, copy and paste this ring mask and use it on the edge layer. Also, forgot to mention, if you do not have this track matte, there's a button to toggle switch modes at the bottom here. Oh, wrong button. You can toggle switch modes and then click alpha matte and it'll take the thing above it. Or you can right click here, columns, and turn on all this stuff. You turn on switches and modes at the same time and it should work. Okay, back to this. Ring mask, set this alpha matte. Now, this is also keyframe to that. What we can do is drag this to the right and we can actually, even better, set this to add. So now the second mask this animation is turning this one on. So these are exactly the same animation, except this one is now, this one's set to remove the mask, this one's set to add the mask. Now we can go to this one and set subtract. And now we go here, drag this over here, go here, set that to there, and pull this over there. Now, what we have is the mask. It should, unless it's alpha inverted. No. Let me look at it. What is it doing? Oh, you have to put it on top. Make sure they're in the right order, I think. Yes, there we go. Make sure when you're working with masks, the add is before the subtract. Subtract is after the add. Now I'm gonna slow this one down quite a bit. Let me go into here, drag this out much further. There we go. And now also, exact same thing as that other one. Just cut it off right around where it happens. That's the end of that effect. And we wanted to minimize render times by cutting each effect off right after it ends. So next, I think we're going to do a very special effect. Actually, I'm going to put this desaturate above everything. So I want the desaturate to go over the color correction when we do that later. This is also preference. You can put the desaturate below the color correction, and it'll give you a different style of look. I will put this one above though. Now what we are going to do is we're going to do a very special effect that a lot of people would like to know. Create a new solid. Call this focus. No, not that. Focus. I can't type. There. Focus. And then we're going to do the exact same thing, except you don't have to like be specific with this mask. You can just swipe it down. There. We have a mask. Invert the mask. We're going to go Control. Nope, not there. We're going to go Control T. Scale it up just a little bit. Hold Control while you're scaling it if you want to keep it in the same space. What I'm going to do is I'm going to hide the focus now. I can see the mask. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to... Nope. Click this, Control T. Scale it up. Scale it up. And I'm going to put it... I want it to be a little larger than the thing that I want to focus on. Then I'm going to keep going a little bit, move it into the center of the object I'm going to focus on, bring it in a little bit, keep it larger. This is important for later. Keep recentering it. Keep recentering it. Maybe bring it in a little more. Hold Control to keep it in the center. You'll have to keep going through and just keep adjusting it. Little micro adjustments to keep it focused. You're basically manually tracking a focus point. Now, I'm going to ignore it, and then here I'm going to add a keyframe. Then I'm going to move it to here. This is when I'm going to reinitiate the focus, and it's going to be important again. Then I'm going to pull it in. There we go. That's what I want. Pull this out a little bit. Now I just want to keep tracking the T. Basically just manually tracking. And we're just going to leave it there. Okay, now we have our manual track. This gives us a mask that we're able to use to control. We're going to drive our depth of field effect. So, throw this focus right above the camera, then Control Y to an adjustment layer, call this DOF for depth of field, or call it depth of field, call it blur, whatever you want. Now, Control Space, call it, or place in a camera lens blur. We're going to use this effect because this is the one that everyone has, but if you have if you have FL depth of field, Frischluft depth of field, you can use this one. It's a lot slower, but this is the one that I use. I prefer that. Or I think it's called Lens Blur OBS, BCC Lens Blur OBS. This is the other one that you could use. Also pretty good. I don't like it as much, but This is the fastest one if you want good render times. All right, what I'm going to do is I'm going to set up the blur settings to what I want. I'm going to set this to 220 and leave it on hexagon. That should be good. So set the blur radius to 15 and then set the blur map layer to our focus, source, effects and masks, channel, alpha. Don't invert, and you want to blur, no, don't blur focus distance. Go into your mask, M, open this, and then turn up the feather to around 200, maybe 300, and then increase the expansion just a little bit. And now you'll have a smooth depth of field effect. Maybe reduce this a little bit and reduce the expansion. So now we have depth of field. What we can do is we can keyframe this blur radius. So right here, I can see my keyframes. I ended it right here. So I'm gonna blur radius 0. And F9 to ease them. It's in the good position for the entirety of this movement, so I'm just going to have it slowly get rid of the blur. And then when it comes back in, I want to add the blur again. Like that. I want it to be focused and then pull the blur in. And then as it comes around, I'm going to get rid of it. Around here. And that's our blur effect. Now what I'm going to do as well is copy and paste this DOF. Make sure this one's still perfectly fine. I'm going to put this one above that focus layer. Call this one blur. Make sure no blur map. Get rid of blur radius. And now what we're going to do is we're going to use this for just adding a little blur overlay effect. This is something that I like to do in my intros a lot as well. So this is you hear how it makes that little sound? This is a very nice way to add a little bit of very subtle sync to your intro. Just like that. Now you can see I created like a close, slow. Press F9 and this creates like a very subtle out of focus effect. You can see how it looks. And now what we can do is, remember how I cut off this blur at the very end? What we can do is have it, since right here is where it starts leaving, I can just copy and paste this onto there. Go to 5, drag this over to the 5th beat, and then pull this a little bit to the right. It's a little bit slower, but it'll look like it goes out of focus and then back into focus through the movement. And now adjust the depth of field to be a little bit slower so it doesn't just dip completely. There. Now it goes smoothly from being focused to being completely out of focus. And then I'll do the same thing right here. Oh, undo that, accidentally drag that to the side. There. Maybe we could throw one more at the very end, if we like it. Remember, don't overdo the effect. Any effect, if you just spam an effect constantly over and over and over, just don't spam any effects, because when you spam an effect, it just kind of ruins it. But I think this is a good amount for what I have here. All right, let's see. What is next? Let's see. How about we add flicker? We put this above the desaturate, add adjustment layer, flicker, save, control space, and just add a looks. I use looks for this, but usually this is what I use. Not sure what other people use, but this is how I figured out how to do it. Go into here, put a, where is it? You want a hue saturation and a chromatic aberration. All versions of looks have these. Desaturate it, and then add a +1 or +2, maybe a 1.4. Good. 1.2, more subtle. And then you want to do is click T or press T, change the opacity, and then I will go into here. And then I will keyframe this. So keyframe, go 1 frame, turn it all the way up, go 6 frames. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Go to 0, copy 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, paste, copy it all with J to go back to that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Actually, I think I messed it up. My bad. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Go 1 again, set it to 0. There we go. 6 frames, copy paste. 6 frames, copy paste. There we go. So you want to have a toggle, go 6 frames, toggle, 6 frames, toggle. And now what you get is and I think I want to have it start right here. Actually, right here. And also right here. And then have it also continue just a little bit. just a tiny bit. And then also have it happen right here. Up until the very end. I think that should be good. All right. Next, we can add some basic sync effects. So we got all like the subtle effects, all the little simple overlays. Now, what we can do is we can add all that nice sync that we like, the distortions, all the displacements. So I think here I'm going to put down a puddle. So I'm going to put this above the sync layer, puddle. Actually, keep this in mind. If you want to organize your layers, you can click this little icon, little guy hiding behind the wall. And all your masks, you can go ahead and click that little hide button. So now your layout is looking a lot more organized. You can keep those hidden so you can mess with your effects, but you don't see the actual, all the masks that are all in the way. All right, now, let's see. Puddle. All right, no, warp puddle. No, warp puddle, there we go. I don't know why it wasn't showing up. I think I misspelled it. Okay, you wanna set the frequency to around 2, set the amplitude to around 0.025. Now, find where you want it to land. So I want it to hit right here, Alt, and cut it off. Keyframe this and this, go here, 1, 0. Set the phase speed to 1.4-ish. Check the keyframes to see if we need to slide it around. Oh yes, and inner radius, set this to 40. Let me just drag this out just a little more, and then Alt bracket to close it off. Make sure you're always saving. Here I'm going to put a turbulent displace. So just under the puddle, Control-Y, turbulent displace. Set the size to like 50. Change the evolution to something that looks good. Go like that. Amount, size, open it, cut it off at the start. Then set the amount to 0, set the size to something high. Pull this to the right as well. So it will look weird. It is going to look weird, but once you enable your sync layer, all these like weird distortions that come out of nowhere look normal. So like this thing right here. It doesn't look unusual anymore. Alright, now that we have pretty much all of our sync, I think what we can go to is we can go to all the extra effects, as well as the flare and the shockwaves. So hide all of your sync layers. Make sure not to hide the masks. Only hide the sync layers. This little hidden thing will help you manage. You only want to have your text layers showing, and your fade and your black, so that you can render very quickly. So, what I'm gonna do right here, I'm going to do a very cool effect. I'm going to create a shape layer. So new shape layer. I'm going to duplicate the camera. So Control-C, Control-V the camera. Control-click your shape layer. Pre-compose, call it rings. Put this way down below. Hide it. Copy your text. Paste your text in. Put the rings above. Delete the light sweep. Control S. Now, in your shape layer, add ellipse. Add a stroke. No, not a stroke. Add a fill. And then up here, you want to set your fill to white. Doesn't matter, but I just like it to look solid. And you want to set size to 0. And then right here, I'm going to keyframe the size. Be something like that. Now I just go like that. Now, this is probably not what you were expecting. Also, make sure you create a 3D layer. You can turn that on if you toggle. You'll see this box. If you don't see it, then you press the toggle button to see it, and then press P to edit the position. 0, 0, 0. Now, you will have this nice little rings layer. It's a lot bigger now, as you can see, so we can adjust the scale, bring it down a lot more to a reasonable size, something like that. And now we close this layer. Now we can just ignore this and create under the depth of field, new layer, call it displace. And then put in a chromatic displacement. And then right when it starts, we put it there. Then we set this to rings. And now we should be able to see, oh wait, always hide the text. Remember to hide the text in the rings layer, so you only get this. Turn off the text when you're done. Alright, now, as you can see, we have this cool little ring. You can just soften it a little bit. And make sure you ignore alpha. Now we have a cool little bubble that comes out. This is an effect a lot of people don't know how to do, so I'm showing it here. This is not the same as the CC glass effect. And then, as the effect reaches its end, you just slowly have it fade out. And then cut it off at the end, and then you're good. Now we have this cool little displacement ring. Alright, now I think we're going to add a flare. So just above the camera, Control Y, flare, and then go click your song, animation, keyframe assistant, convert audio to keyframes. This might pop up, this might not. Just click OK if it does. It's a bug. Now delete the left and the right if you want to. You don't have to delete it. Hide the layer so it's just not showing up. Now go to your flare, add flare, optical flares, and then source type to 3D, and then set your layer to screen. Now you'll see you change the position to 0, 0, you have the default flare. This is the default flare that comes with optical flares. What you want to do, go to the options, just clear out everything, or you can press the clear all button up top. You're going to want to click glow. I think I'll just make a very basic flare for this, so I'll add 2 glows, set it to screen. Global color will be about what I can eyeball the text to look like. One of these will be custom, and it'll be white. It'll be gamma to 2. Reduce the scale. And for this one, we will set the gamma to 0.8. And now we have a flare. And this might be a bit large, so I'm going to scale it down even more. And now we change the color because it's a little bit too dark. There we go. That's about the flare we want. Now we can Alt click on brightness. So now you'll get this little spinny looking icon. Go up over your slider, and now you have a sync flare. Now it's a little bit small, so I'm actually going to increase the size again. And you can just move its position to wherever you want. I think right here will be cool. I think it should be a little bluer. Not that much blue. A little bit difficult to get the perfect color of flare that you want. I think that's the best we'll get. Doesn't matter too much, honestly. But if you really want to be picky, you can just CC toner over it and then pick the flare from the text color. Click there, then pull this up. But again, very similar. Also, make sure in this displacement layer effect, go ahead and add a motion tile and just leave it at 100, 100 for this one, because this effect can be a little buggy if you don't use it properly. Just leave it at 100, 100, and then take this motion tile and paste it into the other sync effects you made earlier. I forgot to do that as well. You also want to do this for the blurs, because the blur can cause issues. So you want motion tile on all of those effects. Okay, now that everything's sorted out, we can go ahead and add shockwaves. What kind of shockwaves do we want? Well, I think for this part, I'm going to add just the basic shockwaves that everyone uses. And then I'm going to use Okay, I'm just going to import very simple shockwaves. Everyone uses these. So for this part, I'm going to set this to interpret footage main 60 on shockwave 16. The one that'll be on this one will be a very fast shockwave. So set it to screen, set it to 3D. You might have to toggle to switch to be able to see the screen and the 3D button. Position, press P to open the position, 0, 0, 60. Now I want to scale it down. Now I can use these controls to move it around if I want, or I can just go into here, slide it over to just about where that is. And I can just steal, because I already have the color of the text, I'll put this onto there so everything is, you know, connected. Everything is all the same. Now I could do a distort RGB, S-distort RGB. It's a wacky little effect that everyone likes to spam. It's not a bad looking effect, but also overused. But for this case, I will use it, and you will see why. I'm going to duplicate this layer and set this to normal. Delete the toner. Scale the original one up a little bit, not too much. Scale this one. Actually, it's fine. Set this to unmult. You might need to use Trapcode Universe for this. Unmult, and then tint. Tint it to black. And then curves, alpha, then bring this up. And now we have a black shockwave. We can actually scale this down a little bit, and then scale this down even more. So we'll scale both of these down, actually. So it's like that. And what I'll do is I'll invert that other shockwave so it doesn't look like it's the same orientation. Add a little bit of randomness to it. And now I'll just duplicate this for each effect. Just copy and paste it, slide it over. Each color change. Except this one needs to be a little bit to the right. And the same with this one. And actually for this one, I'm gonna pull it forward a little bit and then turn them to the side. Bring it forward just a little more. You can kind of get an idea of where it is in the 3D space when you kind of like moving it around. I think that's where I want it. And then here, I will put a vortex shockwave. So go here, interpret footage, main 60. Do the exact same thing as the other one, screen, and then position 60 behind it. But I'm going to change the opacity to go to 0 as we're going behind it. So you don't see it from behind. You don't see it clipping the text. And then I'll just copy the toner onto here. And then I will scale this up slightly. And then place this right here. Plant it right there. 60, exact same thing. You already know the process. Paste that and scale it up slightly. All right. Okay, now that we have all our shockwaves, we have everything that we want. Now, we can go ahead and put in smoke. So, Control Y, call it smoke, put it underneath everything but above the black layer. Now, you can do this with particular, but I prefer to do it with form. I always use form, but some people use particular. It's just preference. Open base form, set this to 0, set this to 0. I do a very cheap way of making smoke. All I have to do is just scale this up to like 3000 and disperse it by 3000. And now open the particle, scale it way up. Something really high. Now it's very bright. Set this to like 0.8. And now I have smoke. A lot of people like to just make a big box in particular and have a bunch of particles in it. That works. You can do that. This is just how I like to do it. Now I can increase the size random just a little bit so it's a little darker. Now I add a motion tile. You can just leave it like this without having to do this, but I usually do this. I usually slap a nice little vector blur on top of it. Direction fading, 35 and 4. This is just my preference. You don't have to do this, but I just like to put vector blur onto my smoke. Now, I think that's good. Maybe I'll rotate it, get a little bit of variation. Now, what you can do is you can either add particles or you can add form. Now for this intro, I don't really feel like doing something super over the top and creative. We're just going to do some very basic particles. So what we're going to do, Control Y, particles, Control Space, particular. This is just going to be a very, very basic particle system. Nothing fancy. It takes a very long time for my my particles to load in. But there we go. Now I have my particular. Now, what I like to do, if I'm making just really basic particles, is just go to the emitter, set it to box, go here, make it a little wide. A little bit tall. And then increase the Z depth. Now that we have a scale, I can open the designer. Just ignore that error. It's a fake error, another one of After Effects' fake errors that pops up. Very annoying. Might also take a second for your designer to open. Mine takes a very long time. Okay. Now that we're in, I can go to the motion effects and set the drift Z coming toward the camera and set the motion to be around 15. And then opacity like that. We have a little curve so it fades in and out. Set the life to 5. Set the particles to 60. Or maybe 35. Or 25. So I want to scale them up and increase the size random. Quite a lot of scale. And then make the opacity 80 and then increase the random to 38. You drop the opacity a lot. And go to particle type and reduce the feather. Something like 16. And now particles to 14. Now go to particle, color, drop around the text. Just increase that a little bit so it's a little more vibrant, a little brighter. And now we have really, really basic particles. Not really much to say. What else can I do? I can add very basic form, but just trying to come up with something that I can do for this. What kind of background do we want? Or do we want to just leave it at this? I'm not very good at backgrounds, so maybe we can just leave it at this, or I can try to come up with something. Let me think. Usually how the intro process goes. You sit here staring at the screen trying to figure out what you want to do. Maybe we'll do another extra layer of particles. We'll call this streaks. Now, these are very simple. This is something that would be useful for everyone to know, because a lot of people also do not know you can do this. Give it a minute to load, of course. And there we go. 0, 0. Now for this, I'm going to open it in the designer. Okay, another fake error. We wait for it to finally open. Let's see here. Okay. I want to do very basic trail. So you can already see the default is pretty good already, but we want to reduce this to 60, then add a opacity fade out. Or a scale fade out. Maybe click the randomize button. No. Randomize on this. Yes. I'll click the randomize on that. For that, yeah. Okay, I will do a randomize on there. Or this one. I think this one's pretty cool. Yeah, that one. Where it flickers out. Maybe leave this at full solid. And then reduce the life to 2 seconds. And then randomize the life by 15%. We have a little bit of randomization on the streaks right here. Now, I'll drop the velocity to 35. I want this to look a little smoother, a little more linear. What I can do is add a turbulence set to like 50 or 60. And what this will do is it'll add a little bit of randomization to the trails as they move. Maybe drop the scale down to like 6. It'll just add a bunch of curve to it. Now I'll set the opacity to 80 and the particle feather to 16 as well. And we'll give it the color afterward. Maybe, oh, not that size. Give it a smaller size and a little bit more particles. And we'll see how that looks. Make sure we set it to the color of the text. And now go to emitter, alt click on the position and wiggle. We could do 1 and 800. The first one is the speed and the speed at which it changes directions, and the second one is how much it moves, how far its range is. I think I can actually increase the scale of the particles by 1. Give them a little bit of randomized opacity. Alright, this is a very basic background, but it'll do. What's next? Let me think. Ah, color correction. Yes. Aha. Can't forget that. These particles are mediocre, but I'll make more tutorials on different kinds of particles that you can do. Maybe I'll adjust these just a tiny bit to make them look a little nicer. Ah, very important thing. All right, so we found a good frame. Go to full. Go to here, camera options, depth of field on. I usually do 1100, but whatever the focus distance looks good for you. And then set this to 250. And now we have a depth of field that looks pretty decent. Maybe I'll try 1000. Because that seems to be the distance that the text is from the camera. Okay. Now that we have that all settled, all sorted out, the background looks a lot nicer with depth of field, in my opinion. I prefer depth of field always being on. But again, it's just your preference. Some people don't use depth of field. Some people do. But now I'm just going to go ahead and throw in a looks layer. Looks. So, Magic Bullet looks. This is where we get all of our color grading. I have a thing called missing effects. This just brings in light flex and these other effects that I need. But if you're using an older version, you should have light flex. I will include a link to this missing effects preset so that you can get light flex in newer versions. I'm using this because my version is very new. So I will give it a nice blue tint. Pull this way down, something like that. And then I'll use color reversal to pull that back. Like that. And I don't think I want to use 3-strip process for this. Okay, so the effects I like to put on. Vignette, distortion, optical diffusion is exactly the same as diffusion, so you don't have to worry about that. Just use diffusion. Colorista, and maybe a haze for this one, as well as that should be good for now. Yeah. Okay. Pop at the start. Colorista. Vignette. Okay. Yeah. Let's start with this. The pop. I'll hide these layers for now. I will give it a 50 and then like a 45, something like that. I don't like putting very much pop on mine. Just enough to make things stand out. Next, I'll mess with this. I'll use fast bloom and then just increase the density a tiny bit and then drop the fall off way down. And just drop the density down again on something very subtle. Almost unnoticeable. And then for the haze, I'm going to make it blue. Pull the reflection exposure back, pull the exposure way back, and then set the spillage to like 6, rage to like 85. Vignette, I like to have this pretty high. Do something like that, and then lens distortion, we'll do 15 and set the flatten to 0. And now colorista. This is how I mess with a lot of the curves and stuff. So in old versions, you can just place in curves. Does the same thing. In this version, curves is inside colorista. But I'll just turn up contrast. You can also use the contrast effect for this. Turn up the contrast. Pull this part down just a tiny bit. And then increase the saturation a very tiny bit. And then maybe, no, I will increase this. No, I'll leave it. Okay. Yeah, this is how I do most of my CCs. I just sit here and mess around with these sliders for a while. And that's how I usually get the look that I want. Maybe I don't know. Maybe I'll desaturate it again. It might be too saturated now. Okay. And I'll go ahead and just take the streaks and duplicate them. We have a second layer of streaks. Yeah, so we have 2 of them going around. This this style is very this color correction kind of reminds me of old Wally's, you know, that 2018 look. But I like it, so we'll keep it. I don't know. Let me just look through and see if there's anything that needs to be changed. Actually, I think I can get away with just increasing these particles to 20. $35. Actually, 25. And then I'll just scale it way up. I think that'll look a little bit cooler. We have some really big particles. And then to prevent the particles from getting right in my face, I'm going to set this to 300 and set the fade to 500. So we don't get hit in the face by a particle. And there we go. Now we have a very high contrast, decent looking style. Actually, I think we can make this look a little bit cooler if we go into here and we give it a little bit more vignette, a little bit of aspect, and as well as that, we slap a renoiser onto the very end of it to give it a little bit of a grainy look. Make it just look a little bit more special. Because a lot of people don't use renoiser, and it's a pretty cool looking effect. Nice to put on a simple intro like this. I think I've only seen 1 or 2 other intro makers use renoiser. One of them was probably mentioned at the very start. I think this is pretty good. Now what we can do is we can unhide all of these, quarter, and we can go ahead and preview what this animation will look like with everything rendered out. Okay, it's finally done previewing and we can see how it looks. Nice. I also was thinking of a way I can make this look a lot more interesting. So, if you want to make your intro a little more interesting, you can go like this. Just layer styles, outer glow. We'll make this, make it yellow. Yellow complements this blue pretty well. And we'll just set this to like 2. A little bit too much. Mess with these settings until we have something that looks good. There we go. That's looking pretty decent. Now that we have a nice solid yellow outline, what we can do, we go into the main particles, and we just take that, turn off the looks, so we can see the original, the true color. Select the yellow. Make it something pure yellow. On the color correction, I don't like that on the main thing going on, but for the streaks, I think it'll look pretty decent. Go ahead and switch this over to a yellow. And now we have a nice yellow streak in the background. Oh, wrong one. I'll go ahead and copy it onto the other streak. So now we have a yellow accent on some of the things we have. Now we can also go ahead and make this yellow. Add a little bit of variety. There we go. Now the intro is yellow and blue. It's blue, but it's got a nice little secondary color add-on on top of it. I think it's a nice little touch, and I'm just gonna go ahead and leave it in. You can do this if you want. I do this in some of my intros. I'll just make it a one color and then just decide, maybe I'll throw in a second color. I think this is good. Now, what I like to do is new composition from selection. Take your raw render or the composition you're working in, duplicate it, make a new one, then take all of the stuff, unhide, take your mask, all of that, everything above your looks, color correction, just steal it from this layer, paste it into this layer. Click source name to reveal it. Now everything's normal. Now, go under the looks. Oh, not that. Control-Alt-Y, RSMB. We'll put a motion tile. Just leave it at 100. RSMB, 0.8, 90. Now, what else we can do with this is we Control K, lock aspect, 1440. So this composition is 1440. We put a detail preserving upscale. Set this to 133.4. And we just select everything and go Control Alt F. And now everything should be good. Yep. Now, this composition is in 1440p. So when you render, you will be basically artificially be increasing your resolution. You can just add RSMB into the other composition in the same layer stack that I just did. Just put this above here. But I do this so I can have higher resolution renders. And then when you render, you just keep it on the same settings and you're good. Also, a side note, recording this after, if your song lasts a little longer, you might want to change the length of the composition to fit the length of that song. So let's see, put my song in. And if you have an outro, you can just slap the outro on top. So yeah, you can take this, toss it in a media encoder, and then you're chilling.